All right, so we want to make sure that everyone who attends this workshop is walking away with some really tangible information and takeaways. So we're going to make sure that for all students that are attending this workshop, you are able to identify at least 2 ways of networking with employers. You'll also be able to recite the 2 interview selection notification methods. So if you are chosen to interview on campus for any opportunities, how would you find out about that? That's really what that refers to. We also want to make sure that you're able to locate OCR position listings in Star Search because there's a little bit of digging to actually find those opportunities. It's not difficult, but there are a few steps, and we want to make sure that you understand how to find those opportunities, and also to be able to identify at least one consequence associated with reneging on job offers. So if you accept an opportunity and then your dream job gets offered to you and you accept your dream job, prompting you to decline the initial opportunity that you already accepted, this is referred to as reneging, and there are consequences associated with that. It is quite unethical to do that. By the end of this workshop, after, as a result of attending, you will be all certified and able to apply to OCR opportunities, to all the full-time and internship opportunities within Star Search, provided that you still meet all of the other parameters within the posting. So you still need to meet all of the filters, and that could mean minimum GPA requirements, your major, your graduation date, your year in school. All of those things still have to be met. But what we're doing by you attending this workshop is adjusting your applicant type to OCR eligible. Okay, so that is the purpose of this workshop. It serves as an orientation for the on-campus recruiting program. All right. I see there's some chats coming in. So is there anything that we should be addressing at this point, Anne? Any questions that you're seeing coming up?
No, just some logistical sign-in questions. Someone just asked if we'll be sending a recording of this workshop.
We will. Yes, we will be sending a recording of this workshop. That's a great question. All right, we can move on to the next slide. All right, so the language of OCR on Star Search. It might be a little bit dry, but we want to make sure that all of you understand this program inside and out and what some of the terminology really means. So OCR, as you can see, is an acronym for on-campus recruiting. An information session is when an employer comes to campus to brand themselves, to talk about their opportunities, their mission, their positions available, and to answer any student questions. Some of them will do this through a general PowerPoint presentation. Others will do speed networking events or case study competitions. Some of them get very creative in terms of how they share their information and in terms of how they engage with our students. A schedule is just a term used to describe an employer's on-campus interviews. Pending is a term used to describe a student's status. So once you apply to any OCR opportunity, you will just be considered pending as an applicant in Star Search. Invited is a term used to describe a student who has officially been invited to interview on campus. And so we use the model of pre-selects and alternates. So if you are chosen as a pre-select, your status will be labeled as invited, which means that you are guaranteed to get an interview slot in Star Search. So when a company signs up to interview on campus for an opportunity, let's say they reserve one room in our center. One room for one day typically allows for up to 12 students to be met with for that throughout the day. And that's, the standard 30-minute interviews, 1 hour for lunch, and 2 short breaks throughout the day. So if the company gives us exactly 12 selections of students that they want to meet with, what if one of those students declines the interview? What if somebody has already accepted an opportunity? That means that there's going to be a gap in the schedule because not all students are going to be signing up. So that's where alternates come in. We want to make sure, and the employer wants to make sure, that every slot is filled, that they're getting the most bang for their buck when they come to a college campus, so that every one of those slots is filled with students to be met with and interviewed for one of their opportunities. So if you're chosen as a pre-select, again, your status will be labeled as invited, and the trigger dates will allow you to sign up for an interview first. Then a couple of days later, it will open up to alternates. And if you're chosen as an alternate, again, you will get an email alerting you to this, which we'll address later in terms of how you find out. But you will know what your status is because the email that you receive will indicate this. So if you're chosen as an alternate, you are not guaranteed an interview. You'll only get an interview if there's open slots remaining in the schedule. So there could be one open slot and there could be 5 alternates. So whichever one of those alternates signs into Star Search first and chooses the slot will actually receive that interview. So it's really important that students are paying attention to what's called the trigger dates. Trigger dates will let students know when the pre-select sign-up start date is and when the alternate sign-up start date is. So that's really important. But again, if all pre-selects sign up and there's no open slots, then no alternates will receive an interview and be able to get a slot. So it's really important that you understand this model. If you're not invited, then we will just indicate not invited as your status in Star Search, so you know where you stand. Work visa sponsorship. So this is a section as part of your Star Search account. There's a question that says, will you now or in the future require work visa sponsorship? So just answer this question as honestly as you can. If you do need sponsorship down the line, you would have to check off the yes option for this. And this is really important because many companies have very strict policies in terms of whether or not they're able to hire a student that may require sponsorship down the line. And so just to be very transparent, this will unfortunately, if you do require sponsorship, it will unfortunately limit you in terms of what kind of opportunities you would be eligible to actually apply to. Some companies will, are only open to hiring domestic students. There are a handful of companies that do hire international students that require sponsorship, but it's a lot less than it used to be, especially in our current political climate and with our current administration, it's become a little bit more challenging from what we've seen. So we just want to be very transparent about that. That the OCR opportunities are a little bit more limited in terms of students that require this. But please just be honest and upfront in that section within your account and just check off the yes or the no option. Are there any questions, Anne, that we need to address at this point?
Nope, I think we're good.
Good, okay. We can move on to the next slide then. All right, so between Anne and myself, we're about to provide you with a lot of information. This workshop is just chock filled with information. And so we understand you might be on information overload. So feel free to check out the on-campus recruiting section of our website to view tip sheets and more information about the program. So you would just visit our general website, baruch.cuny.edu/careers, hover over the Students tab and click on Campus Recruiting. Okay, next slide. Alrighty, so something that's unique about our OCR program is that we ask recruiters that are coming into our center to provide interviews, we ask them to fill out a feedback form for each student that they meet with for an interview. And so if you're interviewing off campus for opportunities, for internships or full-time or part-time jobs, and if you don't get the position, you're not going to know why. They're going to just politely, let you know that they found somebody else who better suits their needs or better fills that role or whatever it might be, but they're not going to provide you with specific feedback. Whereas the on-campus recruiting program is a little more unique because we feel that students who are interviewing on campus, it's a campus recruiting program. So we want students to learn from their mistakes, from anything that they did on the interview so that they can improve those skills down the line. And these feedback forms include topics such as eye contact, communication skills, the quality of their statements, how prepared they were they prepared to talk about the company, did they do their research? All of those things are addressed on the feedback form. And so if you interview in our center, we could provide you with that feedback form as early as the very next day if the company actually completed one for you. Some of them do, some of them don't. We can't require that they do it. Some of them are not able to for various policies that their companies might have, but many of them do complete those forms. And if they do, they leave it with us, and you can come back as early as the next day and come to our center and say, I interviewed with Bank of America yesterday. I'm curious to know if they completed a feedback form for me. And if they did, we provide that form to you because again, it's a learning opportunity. It's a way for you to improve upon your skills and learn from that experience, okay? You will be eligible for up to 1 semester after you graduate. And I just want to mention, by virtue of attending this workshop at this point, this webinar at this point, you will not have to attend this workshop again throughout your time at Baruch College. You don't have to attend this once per semester or anything like that. You just attend this workshop once as an orientation. And then what we do is we make your applicant type OCR eligible within your Star Search account. Okay, so just so everybody understands that. But you are eligible for up to 1 semester after you graduate. And so let's say somebody's graduating June of this year, June 2020. They would still be eligible to interview on campus in the fall of 2020, okay, for any opportunities that are that recruiters are interviewing for. So just so everybody understands that model. Okay, I'm happy to answer any questions if there are at this point. If not, we can move to the next slide. Great. So hopefully you're all familiar with Star Search. You obviously found this workshop on Star Search, you registered for it, you signed in as an attendee for today's workshop. So you should all be familiar with how to find Star Search and log in. You do this through our general website, and then you enter your username and your password. Okay, next slide. All right, so it's really important that your account is always kept up to date. So just know that the information in your Star Search account is not fed from anywhere else. It's not linked to CUNY First or anything else within the CUNY system. This is a completely separate system powered by Simplicity software, and we rely on you as a student to complete all of your information to the best of your knowledge. We create a bare bones account for every active student at Baruch. So we create an account with just your name and your EMPL ID. But then it is up to the student to then log in, enter their graduation date, their degree level, their year in school, their major, graduation date, all of that information, and GPA within the account section. And it's really important that this information is completed, because when you're applying to opportunities, I would say the non-OCR positions, the general positions in our system, I would say maybe 40 to 50% of those have filters in terms of who can apply, minimum GPA requirements, year in school, graduation date. But I would say the OCR positions, I would say at least 90% of those have very strict filters. So if your information is incomplete or if it's not updated, you won't be able to apply to those OCR opportunities. So this should really be your first step. And make sure you typically update this section once per semester as things change. Your GPA is going to change. Even your graduation date might fluctuate, depending on how many credits you're taking and all of that. So you want to make sure that this information is always kept up to date and that it mirrors what's in your CUNY First account. Okay, so to update this information, you log into Star Search and you click on the My Account tab. And then underneath that, you're going to click Academic. On that next screen, which you see in front of you, this is the area where you're going to update that information. So let's say you're applying to a position with one of the large banks or a big accounting firm or whoever, and they are requiring at least a 3.3 GPA. And you have a 3.3 at least, maybe let's say you have a 3.5. But let's say last semester you had a 3.2 and you haven't updated your account yet. The system will not let you apply to that opportunity because it still shows that you have a 3.2 in your account. So that's why you need to update it to whatever the current GPA is so that you're eligible for as many opportunities as possible. Now, this system, like I said before, is not linked to CUNY First. So we basically go off of the honor system. So whatever information you're entering in here, that's the information that is going to appear. That technically means that you can adjust your account to whatever you'd like it to be. Technically, that is what it means, because we are trusting that you are going in and entering the most accurate information. So we just want to let you know that, of course, this is highly frowned upon, and this goes against our terms of use. You need to be honest and upfront with the information that you're entering into your Star Search account. We have our own in-house IT associate who does frequently monitor student activity in the system. And if we see that somebody has changed their GPA 3 times in a week, that's a red flag, okay? It's one thing if you're updating your GPA and you're rounding up from a 3.295 to a 3.3. But if your account says 3.8 and you have a 3.295, that is an issue, okay? So please be upfront, honest, do not lie within your account. We don't want to have to catch you in a lie. If we do, we disable your Star Search account for a minimum of a month because, again, this is a violation of our terms of use. So please be upfront and honest. You don't want to be caught in a lie, okay? Are there any questions? Again, feel free to jot down any of your questions in the chat box below. We're happy to answer those questions in real time. If there's no questions, we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so I always enjoy using the analogy of cooking when it comes to any kind of a job search. So when you cook a meal, you don't just turn the oven on and start cooking immediately. You actually have to find a recipe and gather all the ingredients and buy all the foods that you need and chop and dice and clean everything before you actually start to cook. So it's very similar when it comes to a job or an internship search. So you want to make sure, first things first, your professional documents look absolutely perfect. So your resume, your cover letter, you want to make sure that you've had them reviewed a handful of times before you actually start to submit them and start showing them to recruiters through professional environments. So make sure that you're having it reviewed by a career counselor, a friend, a family member. I would not recommend having your documents reviewed by more than 3 people because it's going to make your head spin. You're going to hear a lot of different opinions, where you should put certain sections, how you should format it, what the font size should be. So really just 2 or 3 people that you know and trust is what we would recommend. So once your documents are updated and you feel really confident about them, it's then time to start attending events and networking and really putting your feelers out there, getting to know different recruiters and professionals in different industries or in the industry that you're most interested in going into. Okay, so this will allow you to get a feel for what the industry entails, different opportunities that are available, and how good of a fit you might be. The next step would be researching the companies that you've had a good experience with at these events and starting to really look into certain companies that have impressed you, whether it be through information sessions, any kind of presentations, networking events, career fairs, any of those events that you've attended, you're going to find certain companies that have really impressed you. So start to do your research on those kinds of companies. We have a really good resource called Vault. You all have access to Vault in your Star Search account. And so you want to make sure that you're researching on Vault especially. Also, you can look on Glassdoor. That's another really good resource. Vault we really love because it's a little bit more unique than just looking on a company website. Company website is always very helpful, but Vault, it's almost like Yelp for companies. You can learn about how they train their new hires and what the culture is like, and what percentage of their interns they convert to full-time, and very specific information. And people that have worked there can actually go onto Vault and jot down their thoughts and their opinions about what the company is like. So that's a really good way for you to do research. Once you've done all of these things and you've kind of paid your dues, you've gone to these events, your documents look beautiful, and you've done your research, then it comes time to actually submitting your application. Okay, so we would rather see you applying to opportunities that you're truly invested in, with companies that you are really interested in working for. Of course, depending on the time of year and how the economy is doing, some people may have to just apply to any opportunities in an effort to find an opportunity faster. But in general, we would overall recommend that you apply to positions that you have a real passion for, that you could really see yourself working at. Okay, really important. The next step would be the interview process. Okay, so we have multiple methods to help you with this process. We have interview workshops, we have seminars, we have a mock interview module on Star Search under the resources tab that allows you to actually record your responses to pre-recorded interview questions, and they're tailored for multiple industries. So feel free to take advantage of our interview services. We also have where you can make an appointment with the counselor for a formal mock interview appointment for a full 1-hour appointment. So there's really no excuse for your interview skills to be lacking, given all of the resources that you have available to you as a Baruch student. Okay, and then the last step would be receiving an offer and deciding at that point. So it's a really good problem to have when you're getting multiple offers. That's a wonderful problem to have, but it's also important to not be impulsive and to actually have all of your offers out in front of you so you can make an educated decision on which one you really want to accept. Because once you accept an opportunity, you can no longer accept anything else. It's considered very unethical. So you really need to put a lot of thought and consideration into the position that you're actually accepting. Later on in the workshop, we're going to address this process and the timeline of accepting opportunities. And what if you hear from a company with an offer, but you're still waiting to hear back from 3 other companies with offers? How do you handle that? We're going to address that towards the end of this workshop. Okay, if there's no questions, we can move on to the next slide. And I think, Anne, you can take it from here. I think the next slide should cover resumes. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so talking about our resumes, a lot of you have already been great and made appointments with our office in order to get your resume reviewed. So as Mike also mentioned, we don't recommend meeting with more than 3 people because everyone at that point will have different, styles and different bits of feedback that it will make your head explode. But just some general advice, you want to make sure that you have your education listed on there. A lot of times when you are first applying for opportunities, you might not have relevant experience, but your education is relevant experience. It's depending on what you're studying for. So make sure that in your education section, you're listing your correct degree, whether it's a BA or a BBA, and your graduation date. You can also include your GPA. You're able to include your overall GPA as well as your major GPA, but please make sure that when you list your major GPA that you specify that it's your major GPA. It's often higher than your overall, so you don't want to, come off as lying on your resume, so make sure you are accurately labeling that. For accounting majors, we also recommend including your CPA eligibility date. We also recommend including things like your extracurricular activities like clubs, volunteering, community service, and these would be formatted the exact same way you would format your work experience. This will showcase your skills as well as keep your resume consistent in formatting. So you want to make sure that your resume is relevant to your position that you're applying for. Make sure your resume is only one page. Quantify your experience whenever you can. If you're able to include how many customers you worked with or what budgets you're working with in your clubs, any numbers are really helpful and give the recruiter a better idea of what you can handle. And formatting is important. I always say formatting is half the battle. If your resume doesn't look good, they don't want to read this great content. So make sure format is clear, it's clean and consistent. And note that anything on your resume is fair game. So please make sure that when you apply that you actually take a second to review your resume before you submit it or before you go for an interview, because oftentimes, you might apply for a position and then weeks to maybe even a month later, you might get an interview and then forget what you have on there. And a recruiter can ask about what's on your resume. So make sure you're prepared and ready to talk about it when you need to. I see chat box moving. Are there any questions? Oh, okay, Mike just making some comments. All right, so please, again, if you have questions, just jot them in the chat box. Cover letters. So cover letters are often part of the application process, but not every company asks for a cover letter. I think we know that anytime you ask someone to do another step in a process, you might lose some people. So that often happens with cover letters. So positions that require a cover letter often receive fewer applications. Now I know that none of you will be that person because you all will work with our office to work on a cover letter, make sure it's tailored and strong for each position. But you might have to include it as in addition to your resume. So just some general hints and tips about the cover letter is you don't want to be overly generic. You want it to be specific to the position you're applying for. You want to verify that the company name and the address is correct. I don't know how many times I've unfortunately heard students who have accidentally sent the incorrect cover letter for an application, and that is the surefire way to get your application thrown out. So make sure, in addition to being specific, you are also sending the correct version to the correct company. A cover letter is essentially a writing sample, and you want to explain what you can offer the company, not necessarily what you're going to get from the position. The companies know that you'll get a lot of great experience, whether it's an internship or a job. But you kind of want to liken this to dating. Like you want to show them what you're great at, what your qualifications are, and what you can do to help the company move forward. So in order to prepare for these positions and these applications, please take the time to research the company and the position. Mike shared some helpful resources. Maybe Mike, if you want to throw them in the chat box. He mentioned Vault, Glassdoor. You can even look on LinkedIn. These are great resources that you can utilize to research the company, learn more about the position to make sure you're putting your best foot forward. So once you have worked on your resume and worked on your cover letter and you're ready to apply, you would then upload them onto Star Search so that way you can easily apply to these positions. So if you log on to Star Search, you'll see on the left side menu where it says Documents. You want to click that, and then you want to click Add New. So you're going to, you want to make sure that you're labeling them correctly too. Make sure you have your first name, last name, and your resume. So that way when it downloads, it saves with that title. Make sure you're accurately labeling your resume, your cover letter, transcript. Some on-campus recruiting positions and positions in general may ask for a copy of your unofficial transcript. You would have to access your CUNY First account, save your transcript as a PDF, and then upload it to Star Search. So again, make sure you're accurately labeling these documents. For the transcript, just as a little side note, we noticed that there is a security function on these documents. So in order to make sure that you can actually upload them, or Star Search will not let you, you have to turn off the security function. So you'll see here that you have to open up the document, click on the file, properties, and then security. I also found out recently that you can also edit the security function on Adobe. So maybe if you can't find this, I think the issue was on a Mac laptop. So if you can't open up the file in the properties like you see here, if you're on a Mac laptop, you can open it up on Adobe and then fix the security function from there. Do we have any questions so far that I need to address, Mike?
Sorry, just needed to unmute myself. I think we're good. You are good.
Okay. All right. So some other ways that you can prepare for essentially your interview or also prepare for your application is attending company presentations. So Mike mentioned earlier information sessions. So information sessions are actually my work child. These are the events that I actually work very closely with to host. So I work with our employers to plan information sessions, which are events that they come on campus, or in this case, virtual events where the representatives can present about the company if you've never heard about them before and share about what their available opportunities are. And companies are very excited usually to meet with students because they want to recruit students, and they love Baruch. All of our employers constantly are banging down the doors trying to get time slots in order to meet with you all. So we hope that you take advantage of them. So in order to participate in these events, you want to, again, go on to Star Search and click the Events tab on the left side menu, and then Information Sessions. You'll see all of the employer events. Right now, all of the events are virtual and still have a component where you can participate in the presentation, as well as have an open forum, open networking, Q&A. So there is still an opportunity to network with our recruiters and our professionals from these companies. So at the event, whether it's a virtual event or an in-person event, you want, when the time is appropriate, you want to introduce yourself and you want to prepare questions to ask the recruiter. I also recommend that when it's an in-person event, you can talk in groups. Just a lot of times the recruiters are answering the same question. So if you feel like your question is a little bit more general, please feel free to incorporate other people and have a group discussion. Otherwise, if you're asking more specific questions, you can have a one-on-one conversation, but please be mindful of those around you. You don't want to make your classmates wait to speak to the company representative, and you want to be mindful of the time. If the event ends at 6 and it's 5:50 and you have 20 minutes worth of questions, you want to be mindful of that because the employer knows that they only have this time scheduled until 6 and they may need to step out. And it's the same thing for a virtual session. Oftentimes, I think in virtual, no one necessarily needs to travel home or go anywhere. So there may be a little bit of leeway, but please just be mindful of the time you're taking. Try to keep it at a couple minutes at max. So you want to also engage the company in a conversation. So asking your questions, this should be a conversation back and forth. And then these networking opportunities, whether it's an information session, they also include things like our career fairs, site visits, and our LinkedIn groups. And then if you are someone who is maybe like me, who is really awkward and not great at small talk, our Networking 101 workshops are helpful and can help you prepare for these encounters. We are still hosting these workshops. Again, they're all virtual and listed on Star Search. Okay, so if you are looking for the OCR position, so at the conclusion of this workshop, you all will be eligible to apply for these positions. In order to search and see which ones are OCR specific, you want to go into Star Search and same thing on the left side menu, click Jobs and Internships. So then it'll pull up this page. And then you'll see where it says position type. You want to click that and the drop down and click OCR position and make sure you hit apply. I found out that's the mistake I always make is I forget to hit apply and wonder why the numbers don't change. So OCR position, hit apply, and you'll see the list of positions that are currently active, currently available under OCR. So Mike might have mentioned this, I apologize if this slipped my mind. OCR for this semester has wrapped up. Currently, if you log on and you look at OCR positions, there are actually 2 opportunities. They're not specific just to OCR eligible candidates. It is open to anyone, so I'll do a really quick plug right now. IHS Market is a fintech company that is hosting office hours over the next 2 Tuesdays. So this coming Tuesday, the 21st, and the following Tuesday, the 28th. These are opportunities where you can meet one-on-one with a professional from their organization to either get a resume review or a mock interview. You can sign up for both. So it'd be the same process that we're showing you right now on how to apply for a position. You would submit a resume, select the time slot, and then you'll be able to virtually meet with these representatives one-on-one to work on these documents. So I highly recommend, if you're someone interested in fintech or just in general looking to gain some valuable feedback from a professional in an industry, I highly recommend signing up. They are first come, first serve. And last I looked, there were about 18 slots left for this coming Tuesday and maybe 25 for the mock interview one on the 28th. So after this, please be sure to sign up for that. We hope you take advantage of it.
I'm just going to chime in really quick before you go to the next slide, Ann. Thank you for doing a plug for that. That's great. I also want to just mention that, as Ann mentioned, there are currently no more OCR positions for this semester, and the fall semester, we're not 100% sure what that landscape is going to look like at this point. We're not sure, given that we're currently going through a global pandemic. By the fall, hopefully things will have eased up, but we're not sure if companies are still going to want to flock to campus the way they've always done in the fall. Even if we're all back on campus and all of that, we're not sure if companies are going to move 100% of their recruiting, campus opportunity or recruiting experiences or the interviews to virtual. That may be the case. So regardless, if that is the case, we would still post their positions as OCR positions like we've always done. But the only difference is, instead of interviewing in our office on campus, you would be interviewing virtually, but you would still have to be OCR eligible to apply to those opportunities. So we foresee at this point that there's probably going to be less positions interviewed for on campus in the fall and more of those positions being moved to virtual. This is just something that we're kind of foreseeing at this point, given what we're currently living through. So I just wanted to make a point of that. And as Ann mentioned, 100% of our services at this point are virtual. We've moved all of our operations to be remote. We are still hosting events. We're still, companies are still reaching out to us. As Ann mentioned, they're banging down the doors. Employers love Baruch students. So you're all very, very lucky. The employers want to hire you, but they're now being a little bit more creative, and they've moved their methods to virtual. So make sure you're still staying busy. Okay, I'm good.
Perfect. Great, and I just sifted through the chat box. So yeah, I saw someone asked a question that do you have to change the security feature on resumes or cover letters? No, just the unofficial transcript, just because when you download it from CUNY First, it has a security function set on it. So that's the only one that needs the changing. All right. Oh, hold on, I lost where I am. Give me 1 second. Okay, so once you've found all the OCR positions and you sift through the list and you find one that you're interested in, you click it and open it up, and it looks like this. So it'll have the name of the position on top. You'll see it says OCR position on the bottom, and it'll say campus interviews. So that's how you know it'll be an on-campus interview position. So like any job description for any internship posting, you want to obviously read through the full description. Oftentimes it includes a little bit of a blurb about the company. It'll include things about the actual position. It usually includes a list of responsibilities. And those are the details you're going to use to make your document stand out. Anytime that you have done a similar task to what they're asking you or they're including in the job posting, you want to highlight that on your documents, because that'll be how they see if you've done similar jobs or you are qualified to do these roles. On these postings, outside of the description, you want to take note of the schedule details. So that's the red box on the right side. Every position for on-campus recruiting has a different timeline. So you want to make sure that you are looking at the resume submission start date, the resume submission end date. That's the last date you have to apply. Please note that it also has a time. So all positions close at 11:59 p.m. on whichever date that's listed. So for this one, it would have been September 12th. And then the sign up start date. It's usually a couple days to maybe a week at most after the resume submission end date, because the recruiter usually needs a little bit of time in order to review all the resumes and then choose which candidate they'd like to apply. So by that sign up start date, if you go into Star Search, you should be able to see whether or not you've been selected for an interview, or if you've been made an alternate, or if you are not going to be invited. That's the nice thing about the on-campus recruiting program is, unlike job boards, on, other websites where you apply and you feel like your document just goes into the abyss. This one, you will actually get a notification or some sort of message of whether or not you've been chosen or not chosen for an interview. You will also get emailed this information. So the sign up start date is when all those primary candidates, so the first round of people who are going to be invited for interviews, can sign up. So you want to make note of that date because it is a little bit like a game. It is first come, first serve. So when you get that email, or if you log into Star Search and you see that you've been selected, you want to log in immediately and choose a time slot, because these will fill up. And if there's one slot left and you can't make it, please feel free that you. Oh, sorry, I can't speak today. Please feel free to email us or reach out to us, and we will do our best to kind of shift around the schedule, work with other students, and see how we can accommodate that. We want to make sure that every student is taking advantage of these interviews as they can. But you also want to take note of the alternate sign-up start date, because what that means is, let's say you are a primary candidate that was selected for an interview and you don't realize that you were offered an interview, and then the alternate sign-up start date happens. An alternate can take your time slot, which means that you unfortunately will no longer be able to interview on campus. Again, we are not monsters. We will try to do what we can to connect you with the recruiter if something happened and you weren't able to log in, but it does mean that you will not be able to participate if an alternate takes those slots. So again, take note of these dates. They are unique to each position. So you want to, again, jot these dates down and really stay on top of Star Search when you are actively applying for on-campus recruiting. Are there any questions about this? So let's say you see all the dates and you the resume submission end date hasn't happened yet and you want to apply. You would click the apply button here on the top right and it'll pull up.
Actually, just to briefly go back to that, while we're on this screen, we mentioned before that even though we're adjusting your applicant type to be OCR eligible, that will allow you to have the correct applicant type to apply for these positions. But again, to reiterate, you still need to meet all of the other filters within these postings. So again, GPA requirements, year in school, graduation date, all of those things still have to be met. So if there's even one of those filters that your account is not meeting, the apply button will not be there. Instead, you'll see a message that says non-qualify because, and the system will let you know what the reason is. It could be your GPA, your year in school, your major. The companies sometimes are very specific about what kind of students they're looking for to have as applicants. So that's why, again, you need to make sure the information in your account is always up to date. If you do meet all of the filters, including the applicant type, of course, which at this point you will as a result of attending this workshop, then the apply button will be there. Okay, so we just want you to understand how that works.
Thank you. All right. So once you have reviewed the job postings or the internship posting, you see that you are a qualified candidate, you match all the filters, and you apply. When you click that apply button, it'll give you an option to submit your resume, and then it'll go into this section right here, which is on the interviews. So again, this is also on Star Search. So if you log on, you'll see interviews, and this will organize all of the positions that you've applied for the on-campus recruiting. So you'll see this student applied for 13 positions, and it'll automatically go into pending. So this means that you are currently in the pool for consideration, and no decision has been made yet. So let's say that you decide, I don't want to apply for this position anymore. Maybe you've accepted another role and you want to remove yourself from the pool of candidates for other positions. Or maybe you made an update to your resume and you want to upload the newer version. If you go on this page and you click the 3 dots, when you click it, it'll give you the option to withdraw your resume. Let's say you are the student that wants to upload a newer version. Please, 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 before you withdraw your application, look at the posting and make sure that the resume submission end date has not already closed. Because if you withdraw your application and you try to re-upload it and the date is passed, you will not be able to upload a new document. Again, we'll do what we can to help you if that happens. But oftentimes, if the resume submission end date is already come and gone, the recruiter likely already has your older version, so you might not be able to upload a newer version anyway. But please, if you are no longer interested in positions, we ask that you remove yourself and withdraw your application. I think that's the information on this page. Sorry.
I could briefly chime in as well. Not to scare anybody, but it's also really important, and you may have mentioned this, I may have just missed it, but just know that the withdraw option will only appear if the position that you're trying to withdraw from is still active. If the position has already expired, then whichever resume you initially used to apply to that opportunity, the company already has that. So there's no way to withdraw at that point. So you need to make sure that you're withdrawing from a position while it is actually still active, and make sure that if you do withdraw, and let's say you want to update your resume for that position, that you're reapplying before the position expires. Because if you withdraw and then you go back to reapply and it's already expired, let's say you wait a day or two and then you go back to reapply, if it's already expired, you will not be able to actually apply at that point because it's already expired. So it's really important that you understand the timing and the trigger dates and when positions actually expire. A lot of it is about timing.
Great. Okay, so we mentioned earlier that you're going to find out the 2 ways that you'll get notified for an interview. These are very, very, very important because unfortunately we've had students who have missed these emails and these notifications and have missed out on interview opportunities. So if you are selected for an interview, you will get an announcement / an alert on the homepage of Star Search. So you'll see on this page, it says you've been invited for an interview, and then from there is a link to schedule your time slots. You'll also get an email from the Star Career Development Center. So I highly recommend that around the time that you're applying for on-campus recruiting positions, every so often just scan your spam folder, because unfortunately sometimes these emails do go to spam, and you don't want to miss out on these opportunities. So just sift through it every so often, especially if you know that you are expecting an email or hoping for an email. But additionally, that's why we recommend taking note of the trigger dates, those scheduled dates. So that way you can look in on Star Search and be the first to know if you've been selected for an interview. So please make sure that you regularly check Star Search and regularly check your spam folder so that way you don't miss out on these opportunities. Once you've been selected for an interview, you will only have 24 hours to sign up for your interview. Otherwise, it opens up for the alternate slots. Again, if in a day or two, an alternate doesn't take your slot and there's still one available, you can still sign up, but it's not guaranteed. So within that 24 hours, please pick a time slot if you are still interested in interviewing. If you're not interested in interviewing, we ask that you make note of that in Star Search. There is an option that says decline interview, just so we know and we're not gonna harass you and ask you to pick a time slot, and we know that you're just not interested. No, I got ahead of myself. So this is what it looks like if you go in the interview section and you want to schedule an interview or you want to decline an interview. So when you go in the interview section, you'll see that word where it said pending before now says invited. You click the 3 dots and you can either click schedule interview or decline interview depending on what you'd like to do. When you click schedule interview, this will pop up. This will pop up and it'll give you the available interview times, and you'll see your resume that you submitted will be attached to that. And you just select which time slot you'd like to interview for, and then hit submit. These again are first come, first serve. So as students take other slots, less will show up. If you're the last student to sign up again and you can't make the time that's available, please reach out to us. We'll do what we can to try to make it work. We also ask that if you're able to be flexible, if we reach out to you, please be flexible. Otherwise, if the student can't, we'll try to connect you with a recruiter so that way you still are able to interview. You just might not be able to interview on campus. After you have selected your time slot and you are all set, the interview will now move from the requested interview side of the page to the scheduled interview side. That's a good way for you to keep track of all of the upcoming interviews and make sure you are marking these in your calendar. But let's say something happens and you have a last minute meeting or something comes up and you need to move your interview. It's like it will still be on the same day, but maybe you need an afternoon interview instead of a morning. You can go onto the 3 circles on that page and click reschedule, but you're only able to reschedule as long as other time slots are available. Again, if it's an emergency and you really need to reschedule, please reach out to us and we'll do the best that we can. but the reason that you need to reschedule can't be, oh, I just feel like I need to go to the mall that day. Like it has to be a real emergency. So please reach out to us. And again, we'll do the best that we can and always try to help you out however way we can to make sure you are all interviewing for these opportunities.
I just want to chime in really quick. We got a question that was submitted to me privately, but I feel like it's important for people to be aware. Somebody asked if I continue with a master's degree at Baruch, would I still be eligible for OCR? So the answer to that is yes. So we work very closely with the Graduate Career Management Center at Baruch. So they are under the umbrella of the Zicklin School of Business, and they have a system called Zicklin Career Link, which is pretty much our version, their version of Star Search. So if you move on to a master's level program, specifically in the business school within Zicklin, they would flag, if you've already become OCR eligible with us, they make a flag in their system so that you don't have to go through the same process with them. You may just have to have your resume reviewed by one of their counselors before you move forward, but we provide them with a list of all of the OCR eligible candidates to make your lives a little bit easier. So I just wanted to mention that.
All right. So
I think
after all it's,
I think this is where we said that I would pick up here.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. I know it's like, I don't remember which number of slide this is. So thank you, Anne, for providing all that information. And of course, please feel free to chime in if you have any anecdotes or experiences that you wanted to add to kind of complement what I'm mentioning here throughout the slides to come. So missing an interview is completely unacceptable. Even though these are campus interviews, they're not off campus. They're still real job interviews. And so you need to take these very seriously. You know, just the fact that we have an orientation to educate you about this program before you can even apply to these opportunities should help you to understand how seriously Baruch takes this program, because you need to really put your best foot forward. You need to appear as professional as possible, show up to all interviews that you're signed up for. There are no schedule changes allowed within 48 hours of your actual interview. So if you're scheduled to interview on a Friday, you are able to remove yourself from that interview slot or move to a different slot within 2 days before. So, you know, you have until Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. To make any changes. But once that time comes within the 2 business days of your interview, at that point, you are locked into that interview slot. You must appear for the interview unless, of course, there's an absolute emergency, but otherwise you would need to show up for your interview on time. If you do not appear for an interview without notifying our center at all, we immediately deactivate your Star Search account, typically for a minimum of a month. It really depends on the severity of the situation. Sometimes it's more case by case. You know, if we call a student at 9:15 in the morning and they're scheduled to have been there for 9 a.m. for an interview, and they pick up the phone and they're just waking up, I mean, that's clearly very irresponsible. So again, it might be 2 or 3 months that we deactivate your account. And so by us deactivating your account, that means you're not able to sign up for any events, no workshops, no information sessions. Any other on-campus interviews that you have scheduled would have to be unscheduled. So it's really not a good move to make. You want to make sure that you're staying on top of all of these things, okay, and taking it really, really seriously. If something does come up last minute, of course, we understand, like Anne said before, we're not monsters, we're very understanding, but you need to keep us posted. If you're running late for an interview, call us, call our main number, which is at the bottom of your screen right now. 646-312-4670 is our general number, of course, when our center is open. Let us know that you're running late or that there was an emergency, a crisis that you're experiencing. We will definitely let the recruiter know at that point. But again, it really must be for an emergency. Okay, on to the next slide. All right, so what to expect at the interview. So generally the interviews on campus typically last for 30 to 60 minutes. I would say most of them probably last for 30 minutes. That's more standard. There are going to be times where the companies will want to do back-to-back interviews. And what that means is they will do 2 30-minute back-to-back interviews with the same student. So as a student, you would be interviewing in one room for 30 minutes and then a different room next door for another 30 minutes with a different recruiter. So it would be a full hour for you, but one 30-minute interview for each of those recruiters to meet with you. And the reason they like to do this is so that they can compare notes at the end of the day and talk about, you know, hey, what did you think of candidate X? What did you think of candidate Y? And they have different perspectives. So it's a little bit more draining as a student because you're interviewing for a full hour, but different recruiters are getting to know you in different ways. So this might be the format of an interview that you get invited to. Employers often conduct 2 or more rounds of interviews, so just know that the interviews on campus within our center are those are just the first rounds of interviews. Okay, so if you're chosen to interview beyond that for a second or a third round or a super day down the line, all of those follow-up interviews will be at the company location. Okay, so our center, we provide a space just for the first round interviews. So it's really just the initial interviews and ways for the employers to get to know you. Okay, from there on out, the company would be in touch with you directly to follow up with you regarding follow-up interviews. So our center handles everything up until the first round. We schedule all the interviews in Star Search. We handle all the correspondence, but after that, it's the employers that will be corresponding with you. Okay. The second round interviews could include case studies or group exercises. They may want to ask more specific questions, whereas the first round might be more general behavioral interview questions. Tell me about yourself. What are some strengths that you possess? Tell me about an area that you need improvement. General behavioral interview questions is typically the first round. But the second round, they might get a little more specific and a little bit more challenging, and they might ask you to start providing examples of a time that you handled a dilemma and how you dealt with that. They might give you specific exercises to handle either in group interviews or on your own to see how you handle yourself under pressure. Sometimes they don't necessarily just want to see that you can get from point A to point B, but they want to see how you get from point A to point B. They want to see what your critical thinking skills are like. So the second and the third rounds can be a little bit more challenging, a little bit of a different feel. So after you interview, as I mentioned, we're not going to know where the recruiters stand. It could be a week or two before you hear from them, or even more than that. So just know that it could take some time, and they're probably interviewing at other colleges as well. So the recruiting process can be very time consuming. So if you reach out to us a week later and say, hey, I interviewed with KPMG last week, I haven't heard from them. We are not going to have any information as to why that is. It could just be taking them longer than usual. They might not get back to you for 3 weeks, for all we know. So we just want to give you realistic expectations. I mentioned earlier in the workshop that we have a mock interview module. So this is especially important, especially given the times that we're living through, because of how many things have been moved to virtual platforms and how so many more interviews at this point in time are being conducted virtually. So the mock interview module will provide you with experience on what that experience is like. So if you go into your Star Search account, I believe it's under the resources tab, and it says mock interviews, and there's over 1,000+ pre-recorded interview questions based on industry. So it's not just generic interview questions. If you're going into marketing, you can find marketing related interview questions, and you're then allowed to actually record yourself, your responses, and it records you. And what you can then do is you can make an appointment with the STAR counselor, and we can listen to that and provide you with constructive criticism and feedback in terms of how you actually handle yourself. And it records you visually and audibly. So this is a really good way to learn how your virtual interviewing skills actually are. Some students don't mind it. Some students don't love it because you're not looking at an actual person live. So it's difficult because you're not able to gauge different reactions. It's almost like you're speaking to a computer screen. So it's important for you to practice these kinds of skills, again, especially given the times that we're living through, because we're already seeing a rise in virtual opportunities, virtual interviewing, just for safety reasons. So feel free to use that module. Okay, we can move along. All right, so case interviews. So I'm not going to read everything on this slide verbatim, but just know that we do follow-ups with our recruiters throughout the year, especially throughout the summer months. We want to know, how Baruch is faring. Did we meet all of their guidelines, all their recruiting numbers? Are there any things that we as career counselors should know that we should be reiterating to our students? So we have a lot of these kinds of debrief meetings. And so some of the most common feedback that we've received, especially from some of our larger accounting firms, is that they've been using case interviews for some of their follow-up interview experiences. So again, they want to see what your critical thinking skills are like, how you handle problem solving. They might give you examples and specific case studies to work yourselves through and to test out what your soft skills are like in the business world. So again, we are going to send a copy of this recording to you, so you'll have this slide moving forward to read a little bit more in detail. Also, feel free to do your own research on what case interviews entail and how you should be preparing for a case interview should you ever be in a position where you're asked to be on one. So we just wanted to put that on your radar, that this could be an interview that you're asked to participate in down the line. All right, making a good impression at the interview. So when you're going to an interview, typically the recruiters are going to have a copy of your resume because you've initially submitted it, but you never know how many recruiters are going to be there. So it's always helpful to bring a few copies of your resume just in case they request an additional copy on the spot. It's always nice to provide them with an extra copy. Of course, you want to make sure you arrive on time. If you have any virtual interviews, which at this point, like I said, is more common, make sure you're logged in at least 5 to 10 minutes beforehand, whether or not you're using Skype or HireVue or Zoom, whatever the online platform is that you're using. Make sure you test out the technology beforehand. You're not going to want to have tech issues throughout the interview. You want to make sure you're testing out the sound. All really important because it's going to be very nerve-wracking if you're having tech issues on an interview. Okay, so make sure you're testing all of those things out in advance and that you're comfortable using that particular platform. So always arrive on time, turn your phone off, unless it's a crisis and you need to have your phone turned on because of an emergency that you're going through, but overall, have your phone turned off. Always want to dress appropriately, and this goes for in-person as well as virtual interviews. Okay, so for any virtual interview, we would recommend dressing as if you're going in person. Okay, so number one, it puts you into the mental mindset of being in person on an actual interview. And it also just reflects very positively on how you're presenting yourself. You really want to put your best foot forward. So always, always, always wear a suit. Okay, so always wear a suit. You want to be as professional as possible, even if you're not going to be wearing a suit if you're hired for that job, an everyday attire. But as an interviewer or as an interviewee, you need to be, again, putting your best foot forward and showing that you are dressed for success. All right. Avoiding any kind of random jargon in your comments and your statements is really important. Sometimes students get a little bit uncomfortable or awkward when they're answering interview questions. You're not expected to always know the responses right off the top of your head. There's only so much rehearsing and preparing that you can do. They might be asking you a question that you're really just not prepared for, or you have to think about it a little before you respond, and that's okay. Just know that it's probably better to just mention, oh, that's a really good question. Can I just have a moment to think about that? And if you do that, you're buying yourself 10 to 15 seconds where you can actually gather your thoughts, think about what you want to say, and provide a good quality, well thought out statement, as opposed to just saying something right off the top of your head, where the quality may not be as strong. So they're not going to mind that you do this. Don't do that for every question, and don't sit there for more than 15 or even 20 seconds. But if you can do that maybe for 1 or 2 of the questions, chances are the quality of your statement will be a lot stronger. Projecting positivity, optimism, this might be easier said than done. We always recommend trying to see the glass as half full as opposed to half empty. Some students are very nervous, very anxious. We read a lot of the comments on the employer feedback forms at the end of the day once recruiters have conducted their interviews. And a lot of employers will say, students seemed anxious, they seemed very nervous, they were fidgeting. And so they pick up on that. They pick up on the visuals and your energy. So you want to make sure that you're projecting positivity and optimism throughout your statements. Try, even though you are nervous, you're in the hot seat, it's sometimes uncomfortable to be on an interview because you feel like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders, but at the same time, you got the interview over many other applicants that applied and may not have had the opportunity to actually meet with these recruiters. So again, try to see it as a positive thing, and your optimism will really radiate throughout your statements. Whenever you're asked a behavioral interview question, such as, tell me about a time where you made a mistake and how you handled it, or was there ever a time you didn't get along with a coworker when you were working on a project? How did you handle that? Like those kinds of questions. You can use what we call the PAR method, because this allows you to tell your full story and what the problem is that you experienced, the action that you took, and the overall result. Okay, so you're walking them through this experience and you're telling them this full example, and then you're walking away from it, hopefully a stronger professional and having learned something. That's really what the nature of this should be. You wanna kind of convey that you're taking something away from that experience and you've learned from either a mistake or a difficult situation, okay? And of course, watching your body language. It's important that your eye contact is very strong, you're sitting up straight, that you appear, you're energetic, you seem very poised and very professional, okay? So if you're slouching, if you're not really making proper eye contact with them, they're gonna pick up on those kinds of things. So it's important that you pay attention to that. If there's no questions, we can move on to the next slide. All right, obvious interview mistakes. All right, so arriving too early or too late, this is a very obvious interview mistake. We hope that you all know you need to arrive on time, which typically means about 10 minutes before, 5 to 10 minutes before the interview. If you're logging onto an online platform for a virtual interview, like I said, be prepared to sign on about 10 minutes beforehand. And that's when you can test out the platform and the technology, the sound, all of those kinds of things. Talking too much or too little, you want to make sure that you're not going off on a tangent, that you're just being succinct and you're providing them with what they need to know and answering their question, but not talking too much, okay? And this sometimes will come with experience, and this is why, again, we can help you with these kinds of skills. We can help you with your interview skills to make sure that you're just answering their questions properly and being very efficient and succinct. Being too nervous, too arrogant, uninterested, or a know-it-all, they will pick up on that kind of energy. You don't want to appear arrogant in any way. I always like to tell students that there is a fine line between confidence and cockiness. Okay, you want to come across as confident that you know what you're talking about and you're prepared, but not that you're cocky, not that you're a know-it-all in any way. Speaking negatively about employers or peers, this is just frowned upon. This is definitely not something you should be doing. This is certainly very negatively looked at. So you should never have to put anybody down on an interview in an effort to make yourself look better. Cliches. So typically you want to steer clear of a cliche when they're asking you about, different strengths that you possess. However, if you're able to provide an example or a story to back up, this statement, then that's fine. Like if they say, tell me one strength that you feel you possess, and you just say, I'm really good working on a team, and then you just leave it at that. That's clearly a cliche, and anybody can say that. But if you say that you are very comfortable working with groups of people and you give them an example of when you worked on a project and how you managed different tasks and different portions of that project, and you all came out on top at the end with a wonderful presentation, like that's a really good background example of how you're a people person. Okay, so make sure you're prepared with stories and examples. All right, watching your humor, being overly casual or unprepared. You definitely want to watch your humor. Don't tell jokes, don't bring up politics, don't bring up anything that you feel could offend someone. You're going to be meeting with a lot of different kinds of people throughout your careers for interviews, and you don't know what their background is or how sensitive they are to certain topics or certain areas. So just keep things professional. Don't tell any jokes. Don't bring up politics or anything that could be perceived as offensive, okay? Of course, do not focus on salary or benefits, especially in the first few rounds of interviews. This kind of information will typically be disclosed once they're offering you the opportunity or further down the line in the interview process. But you would never, at the end of a first interview, they're probably going to ask you at the end, oh, do you have any questions for us? That does conclude the interview today. You would never say, well, what does it pay? You would never, ever say something like that. That's something that you should be doing your research on your own using Glassdoor, the Occupational Outlook Handbook. There's a lot of research resources that you can be researching salary on so that you know what you're worth, but you would never be bringing that up on an interview. Okay, I think we're ready for the next slide here. All right. So I'm not going to read everything on this slide, but like we mentioned, we provide feedback forms to every single recruiter that recruits in our center, and we ask them to complete these forms. And these are some of the comments that we've seen in the last year, and we felt it was important to share it with students that are going through this orientation. So you have a sense as to what employers have been saying, things that they're noticing. You can see some of them are very blunt or very specific. They really notice a lot of things. And so the way that you're conducting yourself and the statements that you're making and how quickly you're speaking and your level of confidence, all of those things come across. And so they are picking up on these things. So some of these are really good. Some of them are a little bit more negative. Should research company and roles. She had no understanding of our firm and also mentioned wanting a role which combined computer science and finance, which is not an attribute of our position. So that's telling the employer that this particular candidate did not do their research on the company. Okay, so again, they are noticing that students don't do their homework in advance. Had good eye contact, seemed confident, try to connect interest in company with personal goals, display how you can adapt. So you can get a sense based on these comments, what recruiters are noticing and how you can be conducting yourself on these kinds of interviews. And these are not just for on-campus recruiting interviews. These are for interviews throughout your careers, okay? I think the next slide also has another set of comments. So again, it just gives you more of a sense as to what our recruiters have said about students that have interviewed through our OCR program. So again, some of it is positive, some of it is negative. Well-spoken, enthusiastic, good personality would be someone you could work side by side with. That's a beautiful, positive statement. Spoke well, articulates thoughts well, easy to relate to, do more research on specific role. Try to avoid saying obviously so much. So those little nuggets, they're noticing, okay? A little more eye contact would communicate confidence and professional appearance. So again, they're noticing if somebody's not making proper eye contact, they're picking up on that. You don't have to look at them like a robot and never take your eyes off of them. But for the most part, especially when you're responding to them, there should be some good firm eye contact established. Okay, if there's any questions, feel free to jot it in the chat box. Otherwise, I think we're ready for the next slide. So these are some skills that employers in general are looking for, and this goes for any industry. This could be in the business world, this could be in the nonprofit world, in a creative industry like marketing or advertising. These are some really important skills that could be conveyed across all industries. So if you're able to provide examples of even one or two of these, it will really bode well for you on an interview. So you might be asked, tell us about a time where you were in a leadership position. So even if you haven't had a lot of work experience, you can fall back on class projects. You can fall back on extracurricular activities. Maybe you were the vice president of a club. Maybe you were on a sports team. You know, it could be anything. It could be internship experience. It could be volunteering somewhere. Moving on to problem solving and results orientation. They want to see what your problem solving abilities are like. Can you provide an example where you had to utilize your problem solving abilities? What did that entail? Results orientation, are you very much about doing different kinds of reports and getting to different results to show data, because data can tell a story. So they're going to want to know those kind of things. Collaboration, how well are you working with other people? Do you work well on a team? This is a very common theme that we've seen across industries. People want to see that you collaborate well, that you convey your thoughts well, you can present, you can work very well with different personalities. Some people are going to be more challenging to work with, than others. So it's important to be able to feel comfortable working with all kinds of people. And then communication, have you ever presented? Do you present well? How are your overall communication skills? Do you articulate well? Do you provide examples? Do you answer questions in a timely manner? All of those kinds of things. Really important skills to know. All right, I think we're ready for the next slide. All right, so after every interview, you want to make sure you're always sending a thank you note. Email is typically preferred because it's a lot more efficient. It gets to the recruiter right away. When in our office physically, we would always staple a business card to the sign-in sheet in the clipboards, which is in our front office area. So when you come in for an on-campus interview, you would be asked to sign in on our online kiosk with your EMPL ID and then to initial next to your name on a physical clipboard to acknowledge that you've arrived. So on that clipboard, there's going to be a business card of the recruiter that you'll actually be meeting with. And if it's not there, then the recruiter will be providing you with their information directly. So at that point, you can take their email address and send them a follow-up thank you letter after that interview. Typically within 24 hours is what's recommended. If you want to send a physical thank you letter, which is always a nice touch, through the old school snail mail method, that's certainly, I love that option because it is a nice touch, but it may not get to them right away. It could take up to a week. It might go to the wrong department. So if you're going to do that, that's fine, but do that in addition to an email, because again, the email is going to get to them a lot faster. Okay, moving right along. All right, so getting an offer, super, super, super important. You want to make sure that you're taking this very seriously. As we mentioned at the beginning of the workshop, once you accept an opportunity, you can no longer accept any other positions, okay? So try to put yourself into the shoes of a recruiter. Their full positions are to place students in different roles within the companies they work for. And so they are devoting a lot of their time, efforts, and energy into filling these roles, everything from posting their opportunities to choosing the candidates that they're going to interview, to actually conducting the interviews, going through the interviewees at that point and deciding who should be hired. So if you accept an opportunity for something, they are then going to decline other people because you've already filled that role. But if you then decline after they've done that, then they have nobody. Then there's nobody that they can use to hire into a role, and they're going to have an empty position after months and months of work. So it's probably the most unethical thing you can do is to renege on a job offer. So this is why it's so important that you understand that once you accept something, you can no longer accept anything else, okay? Almost always the companies will let us know, they will reach out to us and say, hey, I just wanted to let you know, so-and-so just reneged on an opportunity. At this point, we have nobody else to fill the position. And they're usually very unhappy about this. So please take this process seriously. So it's important to know that once you start to get offers, if you're still waiting to hear from other companies, particularly companies that you really want to accept with, reach back out to those other firms that you have not heard from yet. Reach back out to them under the guise of an additional thank you letter. Okay, this is what I would recommend. So this additional message that you're now sending them, you could start off by saying, thank you again for conducting the interview with me back on whatever date it was. I really appreciated learning more about the firm and this opportunity, blah, blah, blah. And then you would very subtly end it with something like, I'm just curious, I'd like to follow up with you on the status of your hiring decision. So this is a very subtle way of saying, I really need to know if you're going to be offering me an opportunity or not because you're hearing from other firms. You're not going to actually say that. You're not going to be that transparent. You're going to be a little more subtle about it, but this will at least give them a little push to let you know sooner rather than later whether or not they're actually going to be providing you with an offer. Okay, so you can also, once you hear back from your first or second company with offers, you're never going to be expected to provide a yes or a no right on the spot. They're going to give you at least a couple days, maybe even a week, maybe even 2 weeks. You can even ask for an extension. That does not hurt to ask for an extension, because the more time you have, the more of a chance you'll have to reach out to these other companies that you haven't heard back from yet. Because as a student going through a campus recruiting program, it's really important that you have all of your options, all of your offers out in front of you so that you can make an educated decision on what is best for you. You should never feel pressured. You should never just be impulsive and just say yes right off the bat just so you have something. Always make sure you have all of your offers out in front of you before you officially commit to one of them. Because like we said, once you commit, you have to decline all other offers that are provided to you down the line. You can no longer accept anything else. If you still have interviews, you have to cancel all of those interviews, which, by the way, that's a really good excuse to cancel an interview if you've accepted an offer. Okay, we just want to mention that. Another thing to mention is that Baruch actually has something called offer deadline policies, and this is for your protection. So let's say you are interviewing in the fall semester and you interview in the second week of September. They provide you with an offer the last week of September, and they say, we need to know by October 3rd whether or not you're going to be accepting our offer. The offer deadline policies will allow you more time to provide them with a response. Okay, and so this is for your protection. Again, the more time you have, the more time you can actually think about what you want to accept, and you can reach out to other companies to get their responses as to whether or not they're going to provide you with an offer. So if you visit our general website, hover over the Students tab, and then click on Campus Recruiting, scroll halfway down, and you'll see the offer deadline policies. And so again, it allows you more time. However, we are not required, we can't require companies to abide by these rules, but you need to put it out there. So you can say, when you're getting an offer from a company, of course, you would thank them. You would ask what date you need to let them know by, and then just mention, oh, Baruch actually has these policies. They're telling me that for full-time positions, I have until this date. And then just ask them, are you able to wait that longer, or are you able to abide by these rules? You really need to put yourself out there and advocate for yourself and mention that Baruch has these policies. Most of the time, they're going to say, no problem, we can wait. We have a great partnership with Baruch, that's fine. Sometimes you might get a company that says, unfortunately, it's great that Baruch has these policies, but we need to know by this date, okay? But they're not going to know. They're not going to put that out there. You have to put that out there and advocate for yourself and actually mention that Baruch has these policies, okay? So just make sure that you are aware that these are for your protection. If you have 5 offers on the table and you have no idea what to do, please know that we can coach you through the process. We're happy to walk you through the process. What's more important to you? Maybe you've already interned at one of those companies and you had a really good vibe there. Maybe you really love the culture. It's not always which job pays the most. It's not always about salary. Sometimes it's about the feeling you got when you met with one of their recruiters at an event, or the fact that you've already interned there and you could see yourself working there more long term. You want to take into account all of these factors before you officially commit to one of these positions, because it's a very big decision. So we just want to make you aware this is a really big step in the hiring process once you accept something, but you do have protections like our offer deadline policies, and you have our center to help support you through that experience, okay? If there's specific questions about this, let us know. I'm happy to address that right now. Otherwise, I think we can move on to the next slide.
We have a question. I was just about to type, but maybe we can just talk about it. Someone asked is if we accept an offer and it's too late to cancel the interview we have for another, what if we accept an offer and it's too late to cancel the interview we have for another opportunity?
So that's a great question. Again, it's a really good excuse to cancel an interview if you've accepted an offer. Of course, the sooner you can let us know, the better. We've had students cancel interviews as late as the day of because they've accepted another opportunity. And so at that point, we don't penalize you for anything because you're accepting another opportunity and you're letting us know, hopefully as soon as possible, right? Right after you've accepted is really when you need to let us know that. But if you're canceling an interview, let us know as soon as you possibly can so we can try to fill that slot with either an alternate or another student that maybe was invited, whatever it may be. We want to make sure all of those slots are filled. But if we're not able to fill it, there's just going to have to remain an empty slot. But if you let us know, before your actual interview, then that's fine. We will understand that. I hope that answers that question. Okay, are there any other questions before we move on?
I don't think there are others in the chat box.
Okay. So we touched upon what reneging is, and we talked about how there are consequences associated with reneging. So the main consequence is that we disable your Star Search account for a minimum of a month. And again, that is actually somewhat lenient. We've done a little bit of benchmarking with some other local colleges in New York City. Some of them will disable the student's account for a minimum of 3 months or even 6 months. Okay, so it really depends on the institution, but ours is a minimum of 1 month. You also have to write an apology letter to the OCR manager, myself, as well as to the company, apologizing for reneging on an opportunity. You're also potentially negatively impacting your future job internship opportunities. So even though it's New York City, it's a very small recruiting world and recruiters talk. So if you renege on an opportunity, if you burn a company like that, chances are other similar companies are going to hear about that. Okay, and so you're not going to want to put that out there. You're not going to want to create that kind of negative vibe for yourself, especially so early on in your career. So you just want to make sure you're conducting yourself professionally and that you're not reneging on any opportunities, okay? And you're also creating a negative reputation for Baruch College, because if a school starts to get a reputation where students are reneging left and right, the company is not going to want to keep going back to recruit there. So in essence, you're actually hurting future peers. So it's really important to think of it from that kind of aspect. Okay, I think we're good to go to the next slide. All right, so please know that, of course, on-campus recruiting is very important. It's a great way to find an opportunity. Star Search is a very active system, but if you're actively looking for an internship or a full-time job, it should really only be one part of your job search. Definitely check out other sites as well. Look into non-OCR positions. The OCR section of our Star Search site is just one small section. There's also a lot of non-OCR positions with very reputable companies that just don't conduct their interviews on campus. And you wouldn't need to have attended this workshop for those opportunities. So that's another avenue you can use to find opportunities. Also, of course, Indeed, idealist.org. There's many other very reputable job sites out there. So don't put all your eggs in one basket is our message here. All right, once you accept an opportunity, please let us know. it's always our pleasure. It's always makes us really happy when our students let us know that they've been accepted and they've been offered an opportunity. We want to know where you're moving on to, what opportunity it is, the name of the company. Nothing makes us happier than to find out that one of our students or more of our students have been receiving opportunities. So please let us know that. Okay, these are some additional resources, which some of them we've touched upon. So we talked about the mock interview module before, which again is located in Star Search under the resources tab. Focus 2 is also in Star Search, and this is a way for you to conduct different personality and online career assessments about yourself. You can find out the top 10 industries that suit your personality based on your interests and different responses to different assessments. Vault, again, is a phenomenal resource in which you can do research on companies, also in Star Search, and Going Global is also in Star Search for you to learn about different visa statuses, different opportunities abroad. So feel free to tap into some of these other resources that you all have accessible to you through Star Search. All right, you should all be receiving our weekly e-newsletter, the Star Weekly. So make sure, even though we know you're probably bombarded with tons of emails and messages, every now and then we would recommend you scroll through this because we really do include a lot of great opportunities. We highlight all of our info sessions and workshops, different jobs and internship opportunities, when employers are on campus, as well as on and off campus opportunities. So, companies are sending us information with flyers and things like that. We feature all of these opportunities in the Star Weekly. So make sure you're taking advantage of that. All right, of course, we have a blog in which some of our peers for careers and some of our student interns write career-related articles, and they post that on our blog. So the link is at the bottom there. And then, of course, we are represented on social media. Feel free to visit our Instagram and or YouTube pages. I actually have my own series on there called Intern Tips with Mike. And so feel free to view any of those videos where we address various different topics related to internships. All right, this is our general office hours, of course, when we are physically open and when Baruch is open. So that's our general contact info. And then, of course, we have walk-in hours, again, when the school is open. All right, so before you all make a mad dash and start exiting out of this workshop, we just want to mention that by virtue of you attending this workshop through this webinar today, you will all be made OCR eligible, again, provided that you've signed in as an attendee on Star Search, which it looks like you all did. So it's going to take a couple of days before we officially change your applicant type to OCR eligible. What that does is that it enables you to be able to apply to every position under the OCR umbrella. So this could mean full-time, part-time, temporary, seasonal, internship opportunities. You will be eligible to apply to all of the positions through the OCR program, and you will not have to attend this workshop again. We are going to require that you complete a registration form, which we will be emailing to you within the next few days. You will be required to complete that and sign it. We're looking into a platform called DocuSign in order for you to be able to electronically sign those forms. So stay tuned for those forms. If there's no other questions at this point, that does officially conclude the workshop today. We hope that you're all staying safe and healthy throughout these challenging times. And again, we will be sending you a copy of this recorded workshop within the next couple of days as well. Are there any last minute questions that you have for us at this point? Let's see, well, I'm seeing some of them popping in here.
2 questions. Someone asked, as an international student, when I try to apply for internships, often they ask, are you authorized to work in the USA? What should I say?
So yeah, many companies are certainly going to ask you if you're eligible to work in the US. This is a common question. So if you are eligible, of course, you would say yes to that. They are legally allowed to ask you that.
Okay, we have another question about the security function. If you could just review that one more time.
Oh, sure, yeah. Are you able to go back to that slide?
Yeah, let me just pop that up. Okay, so if you are using a Windows laptop, you're able to open up the document in your, like in the folder that it's currently listed as, and then you can click File, then Properties, and then you can see this drop-down menu to change it to no security. If you don't have that option, I apologize, I don't have the exact instructions, but if you open it on Adobe and you can download the free version, there's also a way that you can edit the security function on there as well. If you still have trouble after this, please feel free to reach out to our office and we can try to take a look at it and see what we can do.
And I also just want to chime in, these instructions should work regardless of whether you're using a Mac or a PC. But of course, we are not tech gurus. So if you've exhausted these options and it's still not removing that security feature, feel free to reach out to the Baruch College Technology Center, BCTC, for further assistance. The email for them, and I can type that in, it's helpdesk@baruch.cuny.edu. Just typing that in right now so everybody sees that, because that has been a common issue. Whoops, I just sent it to somebody privately. Give me a second. I'm going to send it to everybody. Second. So I just submitted that message to everybody, that email address, because again, we are not tech experts. So you may have to reach out to them if you're really not able to upload it. You know, for whatever reason, it comes with a security feature from CUNY First. So Simplicity or Star Search in this case will not allow you to upload it with that security feature. Are there any other questions? You're welcome to everybody. We're getting a lot of lovely thank yous, so you are very welcome. We're glad we could help. And everybody, we just hope you're hanging in there. We know this is a challenging time, but just some advice would be to stay optimistic, stay positive, stay busy through whatever experiences you're able to, whether that be information sessions, webinars, volunteering virtually. You know, we just want to make sure you're all staying safe, but that you're still continuing to build your resumes in any way that you can. That would be my advice at this point. But we know that this is a challenging time, and we hope that you and your families are all staying safe. How long should we wait before we check again for OCR eligibility? I would say by Monday or Tuesday of next week, you should have your updated applicant types in your Star Search accounts. Okay, you should be officially OCR eligible by Monday or Tuesday of next week. Are there any other questions? How often should we search for OCR opportunities? It really depends. I mean, currently there are no active OCR positions. It's been a little quieter. Usually spring is a lot quieter. So the fall is a lot busier. So I would recommend starting to check around mid-August. That's usually when we make all of the fall positions live, like the fall session is when it goes live in around mid-August, around August 12th or 13th. And that's when companies will start to be posting their opportunities and we start approving them. And those positions will start being interviewed for as early as the first or second week of September. So September is usually the busiest month. Any other questions? And of course, I'll type my email address in again for anybody that wants to message me through there.
A little bit of feedback.
All right, I've just messaged to everybody my email address again, so feel free to email me with any questions after this webinar that happen to come up. Sounds like somebody may not be muted themselves. All right, well, I think we are good at this point. So thank you everybody for attending. We appreciate you tuning in, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.